Welcome back. We're continuing our series to meet with all of the major candidates for governor this year. Today I'm joined by Treasurer John Schroeder. Sir, thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Well, we know a lot about you already, but I just want to dive into policy now. And just to start off with the early GOP endorsements, I just want to hear a little bit more about why you decided as another Republican to put your name into this race.
Well, because I think I'm have all the qualifications to be the governor, and after being in the legislature, and then certainly after serving as state treasurer and serving on all the boards that I sit on. You know, a lot of people don't realize this, but statutorily I sit on over 35 boards. And early on in my as treasurer, I went to a lot of those board meetings, and some I still go to quite often, and you get to see the inner workings of government at a whole different level that I didn't even know existed as a legislator. Has a lot of boards and commissions that help run government that I don't think the average person even understands. So it's really experience at 62. There's something that I have that you can't read about in a book, that you can only get one way, and it's called wisdom. I think what the building lacks, and when I say the building, I mean the Capitol. What it lacks, in my opinion, is somebody who's able to put all politics aside and concentrate on the policy issues that we need so badly in this state, and then go to work, and then work with the legislature, because it can't be their idea or my idea. It has to be our idea, and it has to be something that we work on together. And that's what I did as a legislator. You know, the fiscal hawks that the media sort of coined us, that didn't start off anything to do with the budget. That had more to do with having 63 freshmen in the legislature, and me being a leader saying, man, we got a lot to learn. So that we need to take the time, learn the processes, whether it was education, insurance, you pick it. And that's how it started out. And when I first got to the legislature in 2008, it was about 50-50. It was majority Democrat. We had a few independents, but you know, we had to work together. And but it's the process that takes time. But I think the governor needs to have a much bigger working relationship with the legislature, because you're just not going to fix it if you don't.
Mm-hmm. And I've asked you about this before, about education and funding early childhood education, and I'm sure you've seen the change to investing more into that in recent years.
Yes.
So should you be elected, how do you plan to continue to pay for this? Because I know you're in support of letting the 0.45 roll off, correct?
Yes. Yeah, look, the legislature and the governor is going to have to make priorities. You know, I see all the spending, and it's given me a bird's eye view being state treasurer, managing all the money. I'm the bank for the state, but you see where all the money is spent. And you know, I certainly have my opinions on where we should and where we shouldn't, but I don't have a vote. The governor has a big vote on where money. So you never have enough money, you know. And I want to be very clear about this. Louisiana is a poor state with 4.6 million people, 2 million on Medicaid, almost 900,000 on Medicare. It's over 60% of our population is on some type of federal insurance already. So statistically, we don't rank good at all. We're number 1 per capita for federal money that we take in. We're number 2 for poverty. You know, so these are all things that aren't going to go away overnight. But where does it affect us the most? In education. You know, so we have poor kids, unhealthy kids coming from uneducated families. I've often described the education world in 2 pots. You have the pot that everybody's in right now, and then you have the pot of young kids, children, you know, 1, 2, 3, getting ready to go into that system. And that's where we have to improve. You know, this is a generational fix. But we have to somehow figure out, and my wife and I talk about this a lot. She's a retired teacher and administrator. I get it. Poor, unhealthy, uneducated kids coming from those type of families, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't make a run at educating them. And if we're going to fix the state, we have to figure that out. So we have to invest in it. And you're going to have to make it a priority. If it's a priority, invest in it. And as I say the same thing about law enforcement. If crime is the #1 issue, in which everybody talks about now, then let's make it a priority, and we're going to have to invest in it. You're going to have to not do some of these other things you're doing, and make it a priority. If early childhood's a priority, and it is to me, because if we're going to, every ill will we face in this state comes from a lack of a first-class public school system. That will be a focus, and we're just going to have to go find the money and not spend it in some places where it's being spent now.
And speaking of crime, you know, we're hearing this a lot this election season,
Right.
that everyone wants to say it's bad and we have to do something. But I want to hear about some specific policies that you would want to try to enact should you be elected.
Right. Well, first of all, look, the governor's not the mayor of the cities and isn't the president of any of the councils, okay? But this is really, look, my first professional career was in law enforcement. And my retina hemorrhage was about 28 or so. I don't remember as I get older now, but in my late 20s, my retina hemorrhaged, and I moved on after, you know, I'm partially blind in my right eye, and I moved on to in the business career. But my degrees in criminal justice, I fought crime at a high level, and it's really about relationships and partnerships, because you can't do anything by yourself. I worked on big federal drug task forces in Kentucky and Tennessee, both with local counties, the Postal Service, the DEA, Sheriff's Office, chiefs, everybody. It takes that kind of effort. It's like playing a football game. You know, LSU's not going to do any good, or Southern's not going to do any good. The quarterback won't be worth the flip if he doesn't have 5, 6 linemen and a good tight end blocking. Law enforcement works the same way. But you have to have laws that support, you have to have a community that supports, and we have to do that. We have to invest, we have to educate, you have to have proper training, but I also believe you have to have accountability. You know, and not only just in law enforcement, but across the board in government in general. We have to have better accountability, because we should take prompt action when something goes wrong, because things are going to go wrong. It's not a good business. It's a tough thing to have to go do every day, and I did that. So I think from the governor's perspective, I mean, obviously the state police falls under the command of the governor, and so does the National Guard. I will get as creative as the law allows me to be in helping support the cities, the mayors, the chiefs, the sheriffs across this state. But we're going to start with the state police, and we're going to have the best troop in America, and we're going to invest in them, and then we're going to educate, train, and then we're going to hold them accountable. And the administrative team is going to be held accountable, because I'm going to do that personally. You know, back in the day, I worked on these drug task force teams. I'd like to see more of that. I think we can do some things tactically, and use the state police to work as partnerships. But the state police cannot go in and police all these towns. But we need to be a good partner. We need to lend support, lend our assets. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's going to take an investment. And the legislature is going to have to decide if this truly is a priority, just like early childhood. Then you're going to have to invest in equipment. But equipment goes out of date quickly, and it's something that you have to maintain. Our laws need to be aligned. We have to keep violent criminals off the streets. We have a huge juvenile problem across this state. But I think there's some things we can do that help. Again, it's not going to change overnight. These are problems we didn't get here overnight. We're not going to get out overnight, but it is a culture. It is a culture. It's something I talk a lot about in government, bringing a culture from the outside world to the government space, where government doesn't necessarily act like the normal world, okay? But it is a culture when it comes to crime. The criminal, particularly the violent criminals, have to fear the repercussions, because if you don't, you're just not going to get control of it. And they need to know that these are our streets, our communities, and our neighborhoods, and if you're going to commit a crime, there's going to be a consequence. And part of that is deterring the crime. And I spent a lot of time in my career detouring crime to go be someplace else. You know, go do it in another state or another county or another parish, but you're not going to do it right here in our backyard. So it takes all hands on deck. But it also comes with some responsibility, some accountability. But I bring a background to the table that's going to command some respect, because you can't talk about doing it if you haven't done it. And I'm talking at a high level. I'm not talking about just, I didn't deliver papers as a sheriff's deputy or a clerk. I fought on the front line. I know what it feels like. I understand what it feels like to kiss your wife goodnight or kids goodbye for the night and not knowing if you're going to come home, or somebody on your team not coming home. So it's real. And I know what that feels like. So it's the number one issue I probably talk about the most, that's going to probably take more attention from a governor than what you've ever seen before.
Mm-hmm. And I want to turn to insurance. I know you're a homeowner. You've built many homes yourself, so I'm sure you're acutely aware of homeowners insurance. And so, should you be elected, we're having a new insurance commissioner.
Yeah.
How would you want to tackle this? It's a major issue. Would you call a special session?
Oh, absolutely. And look, let me tell you, it's such a big issue. It is certainly congratulations to Tim Temple, but nobody wanted a job. You know, it's one of the toughest jobs that we face, and I commend him for wanting to run and now being elected unopposed. He's got one of the biggest challenges in the state, next to crime and insurance, two of the biggest things we face, because the insurance problem for the top 15%, they may not like it, but they're going to pay it, and they have assets to move some things around and do. But the 85 percentile, who I always say who I represent, they can't afford this. So it's a major, major problem. It's probably talked about the least because it's complicated, and I don't know if anybody has the exact answers, but I will tell you this, as governor, we're going to get the players in a room, whether it's the legal side, insurance side, property side, meaning property. The construction industry has to have a seat at the table. You know, I recently met with some folks out of Alabama that they're doing structurally, that they say Louisiana's doing very poorly in. Look, this is going to be pages of suggestions, like 3 or 4 pages of things that we're going to have to improve on. But will I call a special session? Look, if I'm the governor, I don't mean this in any other way, I'm coming to work. I'm going to work 6 Mondays a week, and I'm going to expect the legislature to do the same. So I expect to have way more than a special session on insurance. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if in my first 4 years we have a couple special sessions every year.
Mm-hmm. And I understand that, I'm sure you listened into the legislative session this year. There was a lot of social issues that really took the spotlight away from some of these other bigger topics, but I want to ask you a little bit about those, specifically about the LGBTQ related bills. With the overturning of the veto with the ban on gender affirming care, did you support that move?
Look, I tend to stay out of most of these social fights because, look, our problems are in crime and education and cronyism and corruption. I mean, we can go on and on and on. You know, I leave the legislative process that I worked in for 9+ years to work through all these issues and send something to the governor. I will tell you this, I believe in the process, and I think when the legislature sends a bill that's overwhelmingly supported in the legislature, I don't know how the governor doesn't support it. You know, if you know, politics aside, you're representing the majority. We're a country based in a state based on laws, and that's the process. So if the legislature sends legislation to me to sign that was overwhelmingly supported in the legislature, then I would support it. But look, there's a reason I ran for treasurer. I like the numbers and dollars and cents, and we spend so much time on these social issues, and I'm not saying they're not important, because it's somebody's son, somebody's daughter that we're talking about. You know, I tend to deal with my social issues on Sunday when I'm in church. Certainly, from a human being perspective, respect greatly your choice to do with live how you want to live. But where we run into these problems is when you start imposing your lifestyle on somebody else's lifestyle. that's where I start drawing a line, and I think a lot of people do. So if you want to live one way, live that way. You have your God to answer to, I have my God to answer to, but don't impose your will on my will. And you know, that's been a problem. But you know what, at the end of the day, not to get spiritual on you, but if you read the Bible and look how Jesus spent his life on earth, you know, he didn't hang around with all the priests, you know, or the preachers, you know. So look, I'm here to work together. I'm charged by my God to love people, no matter their race, what they stand for, what they do, or how they do it. My job's to love them, work with them, and as best I can. So I don't know any particular bill because that's really where my focus was not. But I do believe this. We spend way too much time on what I call superfluous issues, and not necessarily social, but just in general during fiscal sessions. I think these fiscal sessions need to be fiscal sessions, and I would support not having anything else, or at least have a way where the money issues don't get tangled up and encumbered with everything else, because then it's used as blackmail. You know, and it's politically corrupt. I don't like that process. I don't like how they use it to beat each other up on any, and they use the social issues to do it. You know, so it's a process that needs some cleansing, and we'll see.
And I want to talk also about abortion. And it's another big social issue that I'm sure we're not finished talking about despite the Dobbs decision. Louisiana has one of the most strictest bans right now, and there has been talk of potentially bringing exceptions for rape and incest. So if a bill like that crossed your desk, what would you do with it?
Well, look, I support the law as it is right now, but look, I'm open to listening to anything. You know, I haven't dug in and said on this issue or that issue other than the money, because that's where I'm at every day. Okay, all these other issues, I'm an open-minded, like I said, I'm a God-fearing, loving man and love people. So we'll take a look at everything that comes across. But if the legislature sends you something that's overwhelmingly supported, I don't know if there's a scenario where I don't sign that bill. You know, but what I really hope to do, and as I said to at some forums this week, that, you know, we need to do a lot more communicating on up front before it even makes it through the process, to where it's not an I got you moment, and it shouldn't be an I got you moment. And if it's an I got you moment, then we need to change the process, because that's not good for anybody. You know, because somebody's being taken advantage of. So I think we have to be much more transparent. And you know, at the end of the day, it's a lot of work. People don't realize just how much work the process takes. But we can get a lot better, obviously, because look how the last session ended. It's not the first time. Look, I was there 7, 8 years ago, and I remember standing in the back of the chamber just shaking my head, saying, what am I doing here? And we went into a special session when the budget never passed out under Bobby Jindal. You know, so, but let me tell you something too. I don't necessarily always think that disagreement's a bad thing. You know, it brings things to attention. It's how you handle it, you know, more than anything. And it's you and I can disagree, but you know what, at the end of the day, I'm going to love you, I'm going to respect you, and we're moving on. But we don't have enough of that. This thing gets really, really personal. We need to take that out, you know, because this shouldn't be personal. This is about business, right? It's somebody's business, and I don't mean necessarily business. I mean, but it's your personal business. Everything that's happening has effect on somebody in one way, shape, or form. But man, we have lost the trait, or I lose the term, but we don't know how to have a common conversation and disagreement anymore. You're either wrong or right, and there's no in between. You know, when you live 62 years, you find out, you know, there's more than one opinion in the world, and it's not mine. I mean, and if you're going to be successful in life, you need to listen to people, and you need to listen to people you don't agree with more than anything if you're going to make some progress.
Well, Mr. Schroeder, just to wrap up, you just want to give a few more points about why people should vote for you.
Well, look, I think this state needs a CEO. I have almost 9 years in law enforcement, military and law enforcement experience, 30 plus years in business. I spent almost 10 years in legislature, and I've been your treasurer now for 6 years. So experience is what it is, that I have it. And it wasn't until I became treasurer, well into my 3rd year, when I started thinking about it. Actually, a few people sat down one day and said, you ought to think about doing this. And you look back at all the things you've done and all the experiences that you have, you know, I think I'm far outdistance anybody when it comes to the resume. So I think the state needs a CEO, somebody who pays attention to the operation itself, which, again, we get bogged down in all the politics, all the things going on, while the operation itself is being run by a whole bunch of people, and you don't have a CEO. So I think first and foremost, we need a CEO go to work 5-6 Mondays a week and pay attention to how we are delivering the services of the Department of Revenue, Department of, you pick it, DOTD, motor vehicles. Those are the ones that people touch a lot. And if you listen to people, nobody's really happy. You don't get anybody to hold their hands up and say they have a lot of faith in government right now. So I believe we have to restore some faith and trust. But the biggest thing that bothers me more than anything is the cronyism and corruption that taints this state. And that bothers me a lot. And I will end it. I can end it because I think it starts at the top. It's a culture. It's a culture in fighting law enforcement. It also has a culture in the Capitol, and this pay to play has infected the whole process. I've never been bought. I never have been bought. I have never tried to buy somebody off in any way, shape, or form. So you look at my campaign finance, you know, we've done it the old-fashioned way. We've raised money for the common people, which I'm very, very proud of. None of it comes with any promises to anybody other than, hey, will you just go to Baton Rouge, do your job, and I don't hear anything about you. So I think that's very important. I think the pay to play is a serious, serious problem. We have ethics laws for a reason. And there's a lot of folks that don't follow it, you know. So I want to set the tone on that and restore some faith in this process and trust in the process, and that's very, very important.
Well, Treasurer John Schroeder, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
We'll be right back.